Hello, my name is Marion Schneider and I'm from SAF TV, and we have done an interview with Cathy, O'Brien and Mark Phillips. We invited them to Germany because we want to know more about their experience with Secret Service, one could say, and with mind control programs they have personally experienced. We took the interview 1.5 hours, and Boris is the cameraman, and it was a great time. We're together, and he worked right away with the material.
Yes, the interview was on Wednesday, and on Thursday I edited the video files to my project, and that was of the when you open the PC, the computer, you see on your Explorer area the size of the different files, and on Thursday they were okay, and then on Friday I have another job to do, and didn't get to the computer, and on Monday I want to start the editing of the whole interview, and then I saw in the Explorer area at the files something went wrong, and I saw the size of the files were different. Like on Thursday they were much bigger, and then I opened the files and I saw that they are cut it, and it very professional, because nobody was on the computer. The computer was plugged off. Nobody can. It's the only thing is from extern. You go into the computer, and the files were gone. They were cut it, but
well, I taped the interview by chance because we wanted to translate it into German as well, and so we have a tape now, and you have the chance to see which parts of our interview were not so liked, if one can say, or by chance just disappeared.
Yeah.
So that's what we will show you now, and so don't be astonished that there is not always a lively picture.
Yeah, I've put a normal image from the person who says the words, and it took around 80 minutes, and it's the whole interview, and enjoy it, because you maybe you will find out the truth.
Thank you. Today we have very special visitors here. They are from the United States of America. Their names are Cathy O'Brien, Mark Phillips, and Shyla Miller. They will tell us about their experience in the United States, and they are currently living in the state of Alabama. Cathy, you have been the victim of unlawful action by the US government. Please, very briefly, inform us about it.
As a victim of US government MK-Ultra mind control, and that's something that's been going on for a long time in our country, and mind control is pervasive worldwide. There's a sliding scale of mind control, from information control to the kind of robotic mind control that I experienced on a White House Pentagon level, particularly during the Reagan-Bush administration. And it began because I was sexually abused as a very young child, and that made me a target for MK-Ultra mind control, because it's known that when a child has been abused, that their mind is more suggestible. It's as though the conscious mind takes flight and leaves the subconscious to be manipulated. So I was targeted for mind control because my father was caught sending pornography, child pornography, of me through the U.S. mails, and a local politician at that time by the name of Gerald Ford. He was only a local politician then, later went on to become the unelected president of the United States, and was very much responsible for thrusting me into MK-Ultra in their earliest years. When Gerald Ford went into the office of president, he had George Bush Sr. as his in position of head of intelligence, so head of the CIA. He had Dick Cheney as Secretary of State, Donald Rumsfeld as his Secretary of Defense. This is the same handful of criminals that is working behind the scenes of the U.S. government and continues to work behind the scenes of the U.S. government to date. They do not represent the people, and they do not treat citizens with respect. They believe in mind control of the masses through information control, and they believe in absolute robotic mind control, like I was subjected to throughout the first 30 years of my life. Because when Gerald Ford found that pornography of me and thrust me into MK Ultra, that was the beginning of systematic torture and abuse that made my mind receptive to the orders that I was given. Torture does not extract information from people. When a person is tortured, they will say anything that they're told to. And in my case, I was told to deliver messages to and from different government leaders, and I was forced to participate in criminal covert operations with the CIA. And that's detailed in our book, Transformation of America, which is now in law libraries worldwide because it's proven fact. It is the testimony for U.S. Congressional Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence Oversight that was censored for reasons of national security. When it was censored from Congress, it was released en masse in the book. So there's far more details that are available there. But that's how I ended up working as an MK Ultra mind control slave on a White House Pentagon level, doing exactly what I was told to do for this criminal faction that remains in control of the U.S. government to date.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, it's working now. We take the 2, right?
You can give also the microphone. You don't need to.
You can hold it yourself, the microphone then, okay? But you do it not like this. Yes. Mark.
Wait.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mark, you have saved Cathy's and her daughter Kelly's life. Did that also bring you in conflict with the U.S. law or the U.S. government?
The conflict really was something that my government could not deny, because I had cooperation with many government officials that corroborated and substantiated Cathy's testimonies against certain individuals and she exposed certain events. So my coming out and support of her and her daughter and keeping them safe and helping Cathy recover her mind and her memory, most importantly, was not as bad as most people would imagine. The term is called a whistleblower, and that's exactly what we are. And we are legally called whistleblowers, the United States government whistleblowers, because we have come forth with information that has not been mainstream, that has been classified as secret and top secret and above top secret. Those things, Cathy was never in the employ. She was never paid. She never swore that she would not relate any information that she saw or heard. And because of this, she can say anything she chooses. It's a constitutional right in our country. Now, the reason that she is alive, and the reason I'm alive, is simply because I worked in that intelligence field most all of my adult life. I knew exactly what I could get away with. I knew exactly what I could say and what I couldn't say. And I kept myself safe, and I kept Cathy and her daughter safe. Being a whistleblower, I can assure you, is not a life of pleasure or luxury. It's a life of much thought. You must think everything through before you say it. It's not contrived. You speak from the heart. And that's the reason we don't use notes. We've spoken to groups all over the world, even the members of the United Nations and the World Bank, and we did not have to use notes, as most speakers do. They refer to them. It's very easy for us to simply tell the truth. I can tell the truths about what happened with she and I when we went against my government, our government. Those matters are a matter of public record. Some of the information was sealed, and even Congress, as Cathy mentioned, the two bodies of Congress that see to that oversight of intelligence communities. There are actually 14, I believe, intelligence groups operating in the United or outside the United States right now. There's U.S. Navy, U.S. Army, you have the Defense Intelligence Agency, you have the Central Intelligence Agency, then you have the National Security Agency. All of these work separately. At one time it was thought that they should work together, but had they worked together, then if someone had stepped out and told their secrets, they would have been able to tell all of them. So recently we had this with Edward Snowden. He worked for NSA, or National Security Agency. He had a better overview of what the other, including what CIA was doing, and what the military was doing, and what the Defense Department was doing. He knew all of these secrets. And even though he didn't work them, he didn't work in those fields, he had access to the knowledge, and he went public with it. Even the head of your German government was very shocked and very dismayed over the fact that NSA and CIA was spying on her personally, and spying on every member of your government. Why? I think a good logic reasoning behind this: if someone is doing something wrong and they want to keep it a secret, they need to find out who else knows. And by spying on everybody around you, you are assured to know who knows what. And that way you can protect the integrity of whatever it is that you're protecting. And it's usually bad.
So we continue. Next question. Yes, Mark, it will be a question for both of you, and you have to think both, but I think I say the question first, okay? You did not find justice in your country. What is the main reason for this concerning the law? Who will answer first?
The 19...
Wait. We have to do it. I mean,
okay.
Okay. So, ready?
Yes.
You did not find justice in your country. What is the main reason for this concerning the law?
The 1947 National Security Act was invoked on our case, and that stopped us from being able to bring this into any court of law or from having any mainstream public exposure. At the same time, it has allowed for us to continue to speak out as whistleblowers, and to me, personally, that is the ultimate justice, because the ultimate justice is public awareness. Awareness is the first step towards positive, necessary change, and bringing truth to light is what's going to make a difference so that other people never have to endure what Kelly and I went through, and so many others across our nation and across the world that have experienced mind control and mind manipulation. They need to understand exactly how it works, and that there is healing from it, and freedom is possible. But that begins with truth. That begins with awareness. And to me, that is the ultimate justice. So not having justice in a court of law is very minor to having this wonderful justice with truth coming to light.
But you could not go against those who tortured you or did injustice to you. You could not do anything against them, could you?
Yes.
Please take it.
Actually, this is correct. We could not have them prosecuted under the law. However, they could not stop us from speaking out publicly and telling the public. The only defense they had was denial. They just said, we do not want to talk about it. This is a national security matter, and we're not going to discuss these people or what they're saying. That in itself was an endorsement of us. By them having to defend themselves only with one thing, and that's denying it, that actually said Mark and Cathy are telling the truth, and we do not want to become involved with it. The law specifically states that anyone is innocent until proven guilty. We had the proof that was developed by, as I said, high-ranking officials within the government that I knew personally, that I had contacts with and I trusted with my life. Those are the ones that helped us develop enough of proofs or a case to present to court. We presented those some of those items in court, and the United States government stepped in and said, we are applying the National Security Act upon your case. You cannot take this case any further in any court. Period. That's the end of it. The court of public opinion is the largest of all the courts, and we wanted to reach the public with this information. Unfortunately, the ones that knew about it were so frightened by their government, by what they believed would happen to them if they spoke out. Many of them would not come out and support us. Not publicly, but behind the scenes they would. And we said, we will stand out there. I mean, like I told Cathy, I said, what are they going to do? Torture you? You've lived through the worst tortures. What are they going to do? Kill you? I think not. That would endorse you. And then there would be all of these conspiracy theories to start arising up. So they didn't want to validate us by killing us, and they didn't need to torture us because that would have just made it worse for them. So the best thing they did was they sabotaged us in some places. Like we would have a seminar, and it would be widely advertised. And the company that would handle the tickets, suddenly everything in their computers would go down, and no tickets could be sold, and no one would show up. Except the ones that were organizing it. And this happened a couple of times. And we learned how to safeguard against it. But working to expose evil is sometimes very difficult because some people don't want to hear it. Some people, since it's not a part of anything they've experienced, the first thing they go and think is, this is horrible. I don't need to hear this. This is impossible because it's never happened to me. Well, actually, it has in some form. It has happened to them because information control, of course, is a form of mind control. And it does change your behavior as well. So you're modifying people's behavior, you're modifying their beliefs, you're modifying actually everything that they think by simply omitting information. If we don't know our history, we can never understand our future.
I have one more question. Können wir kurz abstellen? Can I ask this question? I would like to ask, how many victims of mind control, the way Cathy experienced it, do you think existed, and do they still exist today? Is that okay to ask this?
Yes, I'd like to ask that. I'd like to answer
Yeah?
that.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, sure.
So, yes, I wait. We in Germany don't know much about the situation in America.
Okay.
Yeah. We here in America, oh sorry, okay, you know it. We here in Germany don't know much about this situation in America. Are there still victims of mind control, as Cathy, you experienced it with torture and everything today? And how many victims have there been, and are there currently?
The exact numbers, of course, would be impossible to know. I don't think anyone knows the exact numbers of mind control victims, as well as survivors who were at Cathy's level. There are many, as I mentioned many times, there's all forms of mind control. When I say of mind control, when your mind is being externally controlled outside of you, based on what your perceptions and your beliefs are. That's one type. The type that Cathy experienced has now become the most common weapon being used on this planet today. If, for example, when young men and young women will strap bombs to themselves and blow themselves up just to hurt a few people or to kill a few people, it's a type of psychological warfare. They're trying to get the people to give up, to just give up, to not fight any further. What this is a form of absolute robotic mind control. Cathy could have easily been programmed to blow herself up, and her daughter as well. It's actually quite easy. The formula for this type of mind control is so ancient that it's found in pictorial forms in French caves. Some of the monks that were making cheeses found it. The pictographs are in the French caves that show exactly the formula for how to take control of a mind and have someone do everything they're supposed to do for the rest of their lives. To say how many, in the United States, I would say government sponsored types, it would measure into perhaps the tens of thousands. Worldwide, it's tens of millions of people under robotic mind control. For an example of this, if you look at what is going on in the Middle East right now, you'll hear in the newscasts occasionally, this person has programmed for self-extermination and extermination of others. This one person has programmed over 5,000 young ladies and young men. Now, that's just one person. There are thousands of programmers all over the world. Some of them work in religious belief systems. All religions, to some degree, control your mind and your way of thinking. And in some very destructive religions, they in fact operate on the premise of fear. They keep the people doing exactly what they want them to do simply through fear. And fear is a very powerful motivation to get people to do anything, including not want to become involved in helping someone. They're afraid. That fear is, I believe, ego-based. They're afraid that they might lose their standing in the community, or they may lose money, or they may lose whatever it is that they have their guarding because they help somebody. I had no fear. I had no fear of dying. I still have no fear. Cathy has no fear of dying. She's without fear. So we were a very unlikely couple to meet, first of all. And secondly, it would be, most people could understand that I can do this and speak out and reach large numbers of people without any fear. I have no concerns. My fear was eliminated through too many traumas. I saw too much, I knew too much, and of course Cathy's she was abused so much that she lost her ability to be afraid. Now, cautious, yes, I'm very careful, but fearful, no.
So the next question.
What about military? I was wondering if you were going to say something about, our military is all programmed, and we're hearing from them.
Yeah, that's true. Wait a minute.
Hundreds and hundreds.
I know, I was going to get to that, but I didn't want to jump right into
Yeah,
military.
exactly. Not too long for 1 to 6. You know
Yeah,
what?
because it goes in another direction so big.
I will ask that to you, because that's the last question of the first part. The last question is, what will you do about it in the future? But before I ask that, or I will connect it, I will say, what will you do about all this in the future? And could you tell us a little bit more about the military situation? Is that okay to connect the two?
Yes,
One question?
even I can talk about special forces.
Sure.
Or maybe, can I ask this in one question? Is that okay?
Yes.
I will ask, what will you do about all this in the future? And can you tell us a little bit more about the military situation? Is that okay? Okay.
No. Okay.
What will you do about all this in the future? And can you tell us a little bit more about the military situation?
We'll continue speaking out on healing from mind control. We hear from people all over the world that are looking for that healing information. The healing techniques that Mark taught me have been released in full detail in our book, Access Denied for Reasons of National Security. And the reason that we were able to put that in there is because that is my experience. That is within the whistleblower's laws. We're within those bounds to be able to release the information because it was my experience. We tell it through my story. In the future, I would like to have the more concise version of how to heal from mind control, because again, that too is my experience, so I am at liberty to go ahead and reveal it that way. And this is especially important at this point because our military has been mind controlled to a very large extent, and our military now is waking up. Truth is setting them free, and they're wanting to heal. They're suffering from extreme post-traumatic stress disorder and have aspects of mind control that are pervasive in their everyday lives, and they want to reclaim control over their minds, control over their lives, and their soul expression. And that is forthcoming, and that's what we are dedicated to in the future.
Thank you. First part is done. Now we start with China.
This is my first time ever doing anything like this, so.
So can I continue? And you take it then, okay? I give it to you and then you take it.
Okay, you can start it.
Shaila, you have been submitted to mind control as... Oh, sorry, I have to start again. Shaila, you have been submitted to mind control as well. Can you describe it?
I would say that the kind of mind control I was involved in was more of a basic, everyday, what most people experience kind of mind control that is based in religion and based in child abuse. And that is what brought me to meet Mark and Cathy, was that I could see where people were using fear to control other people. And so I began to have the effects that most people have when they're not in a structured form of mind control, whereas Cathy was very structured in what she went through. Mine had no structure other than basic religion and isolation from society. So when Cathy and I started talking, she was able to help give me the basic steps on what she did that I applied to myself. Because of my situation, I wasn't able to escape on my own, and Mark and Cathy, had offered me a place to stay, and that is how I met them, and that is how basic mind control works. It's social engineering. It's social programming, the way people believe that they need to be. And I believe personally that if people could be themselves rather than what people are told to be, then people would become free. They would have trust in each other again. And fear, I would say fear from religion, from social media, is what is controlling most people today. And once you can get past the fear of each other, that is when you can overcome mind control yourself on a much lesser degree than what Cathy had experienced.
This interview is not complete. Some parts of it have been mysteriously taken. That means we only taped the interview, fortunately, but the real film material vanished mysteriously. So don't be astonished and be patient, because at least you can hear what our interview partners had to tell us. I think we have to start it from another angle, because that's not because the problem is that people don't understand what happened to you.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't exist here, or at least nobody has ever heard of it.
You can say the word Mormon.
Okay.
And you can say that there are various levels of Mormon. Two particular, one very, very, very destructive.
Yeah.
Both of them involving pedophilia.
They need to understand. Just imagine somebody who has not a clue about anything you talk
You
about.
would know about Mormonism.
No, it doesn't exist here. We have no Mormons.
We don't have church here.
And
Oh, you don't have Mormons
Okay.
here?
no,
How fortunate.
nothing is here, and no, there is probably very few pedophilia, and nobody knows about it, and it's very negatively thought about, So you have to see it as nothing is known. Just imagine nobody knows anything here.
Okay.
So I ask you again, Shaina, you have been submitted to mind control as well. Can you describe it? How was it?
What was it like?
Yeah,
Okay.
what did happen to you?
I would say that mind control, on a much lesser degree than what Cathy experienced, which I would say most people in the world experience some form of mind control, such as the way people are told to be. And what that is like, religion played a very large role in it. Mine was Mormonism, which is very supportive of child abuse, because when a child is abused, especially before age 5, before the brain is developed, they become highly suggestible and are more likely to do what they're told. So it's promoted very strong in Mormonism and Catholicism and many religions out there. One example of this would be the story of Lot, who runs away from the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he ends up getting drunk and sleeping with his 2 daughters who have his children. This is very supported because of how it affects the brain. A person no longer has the ability to think logically, they can only do. And in this way, a person can appear very intelligent, because they take everything photographically, and it's very, like if they're taught something in school and they are taught this is the way it is, they can see it word for word for word. The only thing is when it comes to being able to apply the knowledge later on, they have no ability to do that. So whereas they can appear very smart over here, they can appear very stupid over here because there's no ability to connect the two.
If she could be asked, Shayla,
Yeah.
Shayla's background as she was growing up, she had siblings that were allowed to go to school, public school. Shayla was never allowed to go to school. She was supposedly being homeschooled, and she wasn't. She wasn't being taught anything other than to be 100% obedient to her father. And everywhere her father went, she went on his jobs, everything, she was right there with him. She was like a second wife to her father.
Which is very common in Mormonism.
It's very common in Mormonism.
Well, that aspect, I wonder too if we should. This isn't. Oh, I was thinking that it might be helpful to show how you healed and what you did to heal, and the difference that made.
Yes.
Because that's an extreme right there.
Well, my father started to see the effects of what he was doing when it's not structured like Cathy's was structured. There are certain behaviors that can come out that you can recognize once you know how to recognize it, such as the way they dress, the way they behave, certain activities. And
So how did you dress? How did you behave?
you'll see people who have many piercings, or they damage themselves physically. They can be very sexual people. You will notice where there's whites around their eyes. Their pupils will be very dilated. Some can be very suicidal and will kill themselves. And when these behaviors started to come out, some of these behaviors, my dad became frightened that he would be exposed in what he had done, using me as a slave to do his work and sexually abusing me. So he contacted Mark and Cathy in hopes that they would give him advice on how to keep controlling me without losing his slave, ultimately. And so I began speaking with Cathy, and she told me how she helped herself and how Mark helped her and what she did. And I started to apply that information. Well, in my dad's mind, I was getting better, and he still had the control because I was still in that environment. A person cannot heal as long as they are in their abusive situation. So he controlled how much I ate, what I ate, how often I ate, and I became very ill. And I personally believe that he was attempting to kill me this way. And so I met Mark and Cathy in person. It was my dream. I actually never knew Mark before. I had only known Cathy. I was very frightened of men at the time because my only experience with men was very controlling and very abusive and aggressive. So when I did finally meet them in person, I saw how Mark treated Cathy. He was very kind. He was very gentle. When she would speak, he would respect her, and vice versa. And that showed me a lot. And they said, if you would come and stay and work for us, we can tell you how we helped ourselves, and maybe you can help yourself too. And so I did, and I began to heal. The healing process is surprisingly simple, I would say. There's no verbal you don't talk about what you've been through at first. You have to take what had happened to you that is stored into a compartment in order to function on a day-to-day basis. You have to take the trauma and compartmentalize it. And Cathy told me how she would write her memories. And when you do that, you're using logic to move a pen. And so it will actually shift and break down the walls and open the doors. And that process, along with becoming healthy and taking the proper vitamins to make my brain fire correctly, was I able to heal and begin my healing process.
Yes, very good. You have become, is it okay? You have become an activist in the past 7 years since you stayed with Cathy and Mark. So how do you see the future of America and the world, maybe even?
I have a great deal of hope for the people in America. There's a level of information control, which is ultimately mind control. And a lot of people, they're told that you have to be a certain way because of the information that you have. And when I speak to people in America, most of them don't believe in the politics that we have. Our government does not represent the people, and the people, they reflect that. And so because of that intelligence, because people can heal and are healing on their own without therapists or doctors or anything like that, they're doing it themselves. And so I have a lot of hope for humanity and the world and the U.S. as well, because people are strong. The strength of the human spirit is so strong, and I see it. And I'm very lucky to get to be with Mark and Cathy and get to see how they speak to people and get to see how many people really do know the truth. They really do know what is going on. It's just that our government won't allow the information so that the rest of the world can know how much the American people do know and how strong they are.
So now the second part, the third part. Okay, this is the third part is...
How many questions do you have left? Just from...
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
So the next question is, what is mind control? Because a lot of people have never heard about it. Okay, so what is mind control? Who will answer? You. Yes, or you?
Well, from my experience...
Wait. I start. What is mind control?
From my experience, from an inside perspective on mind control, it's when abuse happens, the brain automatically compartmentalizes that abuse so the rest of the mind can function normally. This happened prior to age 5. This wasn't a decision that I made. This wasn't a psychological decision to ignore what happened. Instead, the brain actually physically compartmentalizes. It shuts down the neuron pathways of the brain so the rest of the mind can function normally. Then when the abuse happens again, that part of the mind that knows how to deal with it opens back up to deal with it again and again as needed. After so much systematic abuse in creating so many different compartments of the mind, the conscious mind becomes shut down. And that only leaves the subconscious mind to be easily led and manipulated. The subconscious mind has no ability to reason, to consciously comprehend, to any concept of time, and it can only do exactly what it is told to do. And I was operating on a subconscious level then, which made me so easily led. That's what made me a target for mind control, is because it's a well-known fact in mental health and among this criminal faction of the government that when that much trauma occurs, that the subconscious mind is easily led. That even happens on a mass scale, such as when 9/11 happened in the US. That was a deliberate move on the people that took control of people at that time to lead them into war. It's not that the people in the United States want war. It's they were terrorized into allowing the government to do what they were going to do, or what this criminal faction of our government was going to do. That's mass mind control. It's led by fear. It's led by trauma. And it's because of the way that our brains work. It's just a natural function of the brain. Becoming aware of how our brains work will allow us to rise up against mind control, to be able to become free of it. And that's where knowledge is our only defense against mind control. And truth indeed makes us free. So let's get that truth out there, and it will help everybody to understand what's happening in our world and to ensure that our thoughts remain free.
Will ich noch mal was sagen? In diese Kamera rein. Geht das gerade mal? Weil, kommen Sie so hoch? I have to say something because, and then sorry, but you'll make it somehow. In Germany, you are not allowed to beat children. Teachers cannot beat the children, and parents, if they would beat the children, they have to be afraid that the children will be taken away from them. How is that in America? Can you beat children publicly, or is that still allowed? Did you get it? In Germany, you are not allowed to beat children.
Right.
Not in school.
I'm just like,
and
wow, that's so wonderful.
you are not allowed to beat children, and if you beat your children, they can take the children away from you. Wait, that's my question. Isn't that the same in America? So my question was, how is it in America? So in Germany, we are not allowed. How is it in America? Wait. Are you okay?
The laws have changed dramatically over the last 15 years. It's called corporal punishment. When I was in school, it was permissible for the teacher to beat a child with a board. And it was permissible for the parents to also beat their child or children with belts, with sticks, whatever, or with their hands. That is not socially acceptable anymore in the United States. It is still done, of course, but it is not. It's not socially acceptable. And in some cases, if the beatings are so severe that the child has a permanent injury or a permanent disfigurement, the parents will lose that child. The child will be taken away and placed in a foster home. Or in an orphanage, but the actual the way I understand German law it's not a thing that's so popular anymore. People don't like to beat their children here. It's not a way of training or discipline in Germany. It is still a way in the United States, and particularly when you get into some of these religions that are so controlling that every member of the family is controlled by the religion. Mormonism, for example, Catholicism, for example.
Scientology.
Well, I don't know about the children of Scientologists. I really can't comment on that because I don't know. But Scientology is a very controlling belief system. I certainly wouldn't give it the distinction of being called a religion.
But is it allowed to beat a child or not?
No, not really.
Is there a law about it or not?
Yes, there are laws, but they vary from state to state as far as the punishment goes. In some cases, the punishment could be that the parents would have to go to a class or school for a week on how to discipline your children, Whereas in other instances, if a child is hurt very badly, one of the parents may go to prison, and the child be taken away.
Also, if I may, Mormons especially have they have the main Mormon church, but they also have smaller spin-off groups that isolate the whole group of people. So it's they have their own. It's like their own little world. And so they all will defend and protect each other in the abusive situation. Like, for example, Mormons have many wives. And so the children will often be abused, and all the wives will protect the abuser and the other families that are abusing. And so religion, we have freedom of religion. It's in our Constitution, which is a good thing and a bad thing. The religions will often, or they use the cover-up, they use the religion as a cover-up, as a way of hiding it. There are many religions that do believe that that is the way to raise a child, that that's how to do it. They will often take a small child that's maybe as soon as they have started their menstrual cycle, whether that be age 13 or age 8. That is the age that they can get married. In Utah, for example, they've changed the laws since then, but they still do apply it in secret. So secrets play a very large role in that. So yes, it's against the law. However, as long as people keep it hidden and as long as people have their beliefs, it still does go on.
I'd like to have a little input on that as well, because we found a very corrupt court system, especially in our quest for getting help for my daughter Kelly. And there were many, many mothers all across the nation that had abused children, that had their children had been abused by the fathers, perhaps, and then they would take them into the court system to keep the father away, and instead the courts were turning these abused children over to their abusers instead, because it was for the proliferation of mind control. It was very deliberate. It spanned our whole court system, and it was a total mess. Well, awareness started rising as to what was going on in the court systems, how abuse perpetuates mind control, and how all that was being done. That knowledge made some changes, and it continues to make changes. And our little community where we live, because awareness is high there and people do know the truth, they do not tolerate child abuse, they do not tolerate child abusers, and there are harsher penalties for that than most anything in our little community. But that is because that's the people reclaiming control over the government, the court systems in their lives. But until then, it didn't really even matter whether it was against the law or within the law. They structured it in a manner that continued the mind control and the abuse until now. Now things are changing, and I'm deeply encouraged to know that Germany doesn't tolerate it at all. I think what happened in Germany many years ago with Adolf Hitler has certainly shown them the inside of mind control in a way that they have grown and evolved and claimed the strength of spirit and restored some forms of justice and in a manner that's more conducive to maintaining free thought. That's encouraging.
So the last question now, it is, are there new forms of mind control?
Oh, yes. I'll start out by answering your question, are there new forms of mind control, by stating that technology, when I was working for the government, was 25 to 50 years ahead of whatever the people had at their disposal. Now technology is evolving much faster. I can't even imagine beyond a certain point where they are now technologically. Of course, I am well connected into the mental health fields all over the world with some of the top psychiatrists and scientists and mind scientists, doctors. They are aware of many of the advances in technologies that can be used to control a human mind. That was why I became so angry and so incensed. And what really was behind my wanting to rescue Cathy and her daughter, because trauma-based mind control is an ancient form of mind control. It's ridiculous. It can only be practiced by someone who is a psychopath, someone who enjoys inflicting pain and torment on another individual. I didn't work with these kind of people. Yes, I knew they existed, of course, but I didn't work with them. I never was in their mindset. So when I found out that Cathy and her daughter were just one of many women, for instance, and men too, but women that were being used and abused in this way, I said, this has got to stop. I have seen many forms of mind control, very benevolent forms, where people had brain disorders, they had brain injuries, and they had all sorts of things, brain chemistry problems, genetic problems, that they could lead healthy, normal, productive lives if their mind was, as you say, controlled in a certain manner, externally. The external ways to control a mind now, electronically, are so far advanced that actually for a few $100 US or a few euros, I can build a device that you could control someone else's mind with. It's very simple. It's not going to be a very sophisticated piece of electronics. It's only going to create fear, apathy, the whole range of human emotions. That's what this type of electronic mind control I'm speaking of, that I could actually produce a piece of equipment. And it's not secret. You can get the formulas, you can get the technology, the schematics right off of the internet. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that use this kind of stuff. So where is mind control going? It's going in a direction that is beyond most people's ability to even logically think about it. Because the brain runs very much like a radio, a receiver as well as a broadcast type. So to tune into that frequency and to become in charge of the frequency of the brain is so simple with technologies that have advanced in just say the past 5 years. I'm talking about equipment that was 20 years ago. I had equipment in my own home that protected my house. It was if someone broke in, they would come in and forget why they were there. They would not eat, they would not sleep, they would not drink. They would be there until I came in. And of course, if I was gone for a month or even 3 weeks, they'd be dead when I got there. They wouldn't have walked out, they wouldn't have taken anything. It just stops their brain from logically reasoning. I thought this was a great burglar system, a great type of security system, because no one, and I demonstrated it for my neighbors. I would say, here's a column of numbers. Can you add these up? And of course. I said, I don't think so. And I would turn the equipment on, and they would look at the numbers and laugh, and I said, well, add them up. And they can't even think to do it. So that's the forms of mind control is technological now. In Gulf War I, We had on our F-114A stealth fighters, as well as the Osprey, I believe one other aircraft. It was standard cockpit equipment. And I know that the people that are listening to this or listening or watching this right now can relate to what I'm going to say. When the United States came in, and Saddam's troops, his Republican Guard as they're called, were advancing towards Kuwait, our fighter jets our tanks were coming, but our fighter jets came in first and scraped the ground. They did not shoot, they did not throw bombs, they scraped the ground. Those people, those hardened soldiers, heard what they believed was the voice of Muhammad telling them to put their weapons down and raise their arms and stand there. And our tanks ran over them and killed them. Now, that was a demonstration, the first time that the U.S. military has ever used an advanced form of mind control in the war theater. Now, there have been many, many kinds. Since the Korean conflict, there have been many kinds that have been used. Nothing so sophisticated as what was on board that aircraft. That equipment that those aircraft were using, I was aware of before I rescued Cathy in 1988. It's been around that long. So what do they have now? Oh, I have no idea. It's so far advanced.
Also, another good example would be in American grocery stores. We have these very large grocery stores that have clothing and groceries and pharmacies and things like that. Well, you'll be walking down one of the aisles, especially in the children's aisles, where suddenly you'll hear a voice in your head that will say, "Let me tell you about this product." And it can take a while when you start to look around to find out where that voice is coming from, because it sounds like it's in your head.
And the person next to you can't hear it.
They can't necessarily hear it until they get to the point where you're at through the aisle. That you'll also notice in a lot of our American grocery stores, one in particular, that people will go in there, or people that are already working there are just no blinking, just zombies. And that is a new level of mind control that is being used on American citizens today. And I would be willing to assume that all over the world that these same techniques
in Germany as well.
In Germany as well.
Yes, the technology that she's speaking of, one of the technologies, it's very famous. It started in Times Square. In Times Square there, in New York City, when you approach, I guess it's Fifth, I don't remember the name. It's on Fifth Avenue. But as you approach this one huge billboard, electronic billboard, when your feet hit a certain spot, you'll hear a voice say, "Stop! Wait! Let me show you something. Look over here." And you can watch the people do it. The people next to them are wondering, well, what are they looking at? What are they hearing? Or maybe what are they hearing? They're hearing an advertisement in their head, because your skull is being used as an antenna for this particular frequency that they're broadcasting. It's not sophisticated technology. It's been around a long time. The airlines were the very first to use a form of mind control, if you want to call it that, at the turnstiles. The turnstiles, when you walk through, it clicks. At the turnstiles at airports for security, when your hand touched that bar to make it click, the technology was literally listening in on your brain to see if you had any ulterior motive for being in that airport. Were you going to do something bad? Not necessarily. It wasn't fear-based. Fear comes out in your hands as sweat, or it comes out in a form of zinc. There's a number of ways to determine fear, like a lie detector does test. This was different, very different. This was looking for certain type frequency band brain waves, and when it detected them, immediately there was a police officer or someone in control of security that was watching you your entire time you were in that airport. And they would go through your luggage, and they behind your back and in front of you. They'd stop you and show your identification and go through your things. This was a way, one of the first tests of a form of mind control that used your entire body. Because if you touch that, of course, a lot of people use their arm or their elbow, and it doesn't work so well. It only works if you touch it. So they had to use other kinds of doors and other things that you'd have to touch. But the advances in external control of the mind are so rapidly increasing that in one instance, it's one highly sophisticated, well-known form is HARP. Are you familiar with the HARP antenna array?
I looked it up on the internet because you told me,
Yeah.
but there is nothing to be found. If
No.
you look, neither.
I can tell you where it's
Yeah,
from.
it's nowhere.
HARP is a high altitude oral research project. It was originally told to everyone that this project was for studying the aurora borealis, the electrical displays that you see at the poles, particularly the North Pole, and the northern countries. This was supposedly what they were studying. It was not. They were studying Tesla theories and determining how to use a device, a radio device, to literally transmit enormous amounts of energy using the Earth's own magnetic field to another point on the planet wirelessly. No wires, no nothing, just to transmit. Well, they also found that if they turned it to the same frequency as what your brain works on, 6 to 8 hertz, that they could actually control the attitudes of mass numbers of people at one time. Around voting times, or when the people were having to make decisions with regards to will we go to war, will we not go to war, do we support this, do we support that. The University of Alaska maintained a online presence, and it showed whether or not HARP was being used and how high the frequency was going and how much saturation it was and where it was directed to. And every time, and for years, everybody was watching the computer and checking it and seeing that, or everybody we knew that knew about this technology was seeing for themselves that the government was attempting to control the emotional systems of everyone within its boundaries. And they also moved several of these same antenna arrays all over the world. They had them in Australia, they had them in Norway, they had them in a number of places. 3 months ago, well actually in May, the United States government just shut all of those down, every one of them around the world. Everyone was stopped. The equipment no longer functions. They took out all of the computers, all of the equipment. The antennas are still there, but they're useless without the equipment, and they took it all out.
If they shut it down, what do they have now to replace it is what I'm wondering. And I think technology's advanced so much. Back in 1980, when my daughter Kelly was born, she was subjected to harmonic technological mind control back then. And it has only advanced.
Can you explain
technology
what is it, harmonic?
Harmonic mind control, the best way I could explain that is that when people hear music, and music is harmonics, and harmonics are a vibrational frequency, and our brains operate on vibrational frequency. So when we hear music, it affects the neuron pathways in the brain and how it fires. So that when there's a certain song that you hear, you might remember where you were when you first heard that song. Oh, we fell in love to that song. Or I remember what we were doing back when we heard that. You know, and songs bring up memories of people, for people all the time. That's a mild example of how harmonics affect the brain. It's fine-tuned to a point where it's not even audible. It's not something that you hear. It's something that's embedded in music, perhaps, embedded in an advertisement, embedded in the music played quietly in a store or something like that that can be affected. How we're using it directly to absolutely robotically control a person. They had it fine-tuned to a point where they would do exactly what they were told to do, and it made a robotic human being back in 1980. What they have now, I think we all need to pay attention to the effect that technology is having on all of us, and realize that no matter how advanced technology is, no matter how advanced the technology is that is being used to control us, technology cannot touch and affect the strength of the human spirit. The saving grace of humanity is the strength of the human spirit. That's where we win, and that's where this control over us all loses. And people just need to gather that strength of spirit, learn truth. Truth makes us free to have that strength of spirit and rise above whatever technologies they do have today.
May I ask you, what did they do with your daughter? I mean, one cannot imagine. If you say they used it, but what happened? What did they do?
It vibrated the neuron pathways in her brain and made it fire differently, to where she was extremely intelligent. As a 2-year-old, she stood at attention in the White House and could speak like an adult in her vocabulary and phraseology, because it's like they could pump information, vast amounts of information into her brain using that harmonic wave. That's what it was like for her. That didn't allow for her for any free thought. That only allowed her to think, for her brain to utilize the thoughts that were pumped into her head.
And how were they pumped in her head?
Through the harmonic equipment. Back then in 1980, it was through headphones, and that put so much information in that they brought that into the education system, at least in the United States, Canada also, but and I'm sure other countries as well. But what they would do is they would put children in front of a computer with the headphones on, and the harmonics would drive information in. That made them appear intelligent, but they had no applicable knowledge. They could not apply that information because they didn't have the spirit, the free will, the drivers behind it to utilize it in any particular direction. So it was really not working to the degree that I would think they would want it to. So again, who knows what they have today? That was back in 1980.
Then let me inject one thing that you could relate to, even here in Germany. It's not illegal here. It's not illegal in any country that I know about. The department stores they play music through a sound system. It's supposed to relax the buyers to where they'll take more time to devote to looking and buying impulse things. It also has a subcarrier, something below the person's ability to hear it, that tells them, do not steal, do not shoplift, do not steal, and it's constant. And one of the negative side effects of this is what Shayla was approaching a while ago. The employees there seem to have lost their ability to express emotion. It's just very mechanical.
Very
And-
stone-faced.
And I always ask the cashier when we're checking out, I'll say, do you pay any attention to the music? No. Do you hear it at night when you sleep? No.
They will become angered sometimes.
Yeah, very angry. When they can be very pleasant people, but when you ask them the question, something inside of them it knows that something is very disturbing. I would venture to say that the vast majority of employees at those stores are not aware that this sub-audible command of "do not steal," "do not take," "do not shoplift." They're not aware that this is even being broadcast into their ads, or that the company even does it. There are many companies in the United States. Actually, Siemens here in Germany is a manufacturer of a program of this sort. They're no secret. This is not secret at all.
Technology is neither good nor bad. It's who
No.
has control of it for
How
what
it's
purpose.
used.
And when I look at how music is used, and it can be very soothing. Our liquid sound experience in the pool is just so relaxing and beautiful. I would like to have that music so I can return to the beauty of that experience. So it's not